What's up with Aloha Stadium? As work continues to clear out the current site, the path forward remains unclear as Governor Josh Green announces plans to seek an alternative path toward redeveloping the landmark. But what does that mean? What will the new stadium look like? And ultimately, how much will taxpayers have to pay to create a new epicenter for Hawaii sports and entertainment? Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. The wait continues to find out what will happen to Aloha Stadium nearly 2.5 years since it was declared unsafe for spectators. It was hoped construction on a new stadium would be underway by now, but the rusting structure still stands as a monument to government indecision. While Governor Green is pursuing what he calls a new path for the project, many people are wondering what's up with Aloha Stadium. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email or call in your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Senator Glenn Mackay is Majority Floor Leader at the Hawaii State Senate. The district he represents stretches from Kalihi to Waipahu and includes Aloha Stadium. He also serves as the Vice Chair of the Committee on Energy, Economic Development, and Tourism. Luis Salaverria is the head of the State Department of Budget and Finance. Prior to his appointment, he served in various executive roles in state government, including Deputy Director of Finance and as the Director of the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. Stephen Wood is the chair of the Aiea Neighborhood Board. He has lived in Aiea since 2016 and has been active in several community projects, including the Halava Stream dredging effort, Makalapa Park restoration, and restrictive parking zone efforts for Halava. Ben Cayetano is former Hawaii governor. Prior to becoming governor, he served in the State House and Senate and as lieutenant governor. He's been outspoken on the future of the stadium. We did invite representatives from the Aloha Stadium Authority and the State Department of Accounting and General Services, but both declined, citing procurement law restrictions on public statements. Let me start, though, with Luis Salaverria as a member of the administration. Where does it stand now? Where are we? And if you can use the term bid or something else other than RFP, NASED, and all these other acronyms that we throw around all the time, where does it stand? How soon are we going to get going with this?
You know, where we are right now, basically, after we reevaluated the previous, contract vehicle, call it procurement, is we are in the process of really coming up with a good kind of concession and partnership plan to go forward in order to just reduce the risk on the state when it comes to maintaining and managing a facility for 30 years. So where it stands right now, as we get through the legislative session, there are a couple of requests that are in there that would need to be executed on. But after we get out of the legislative session, the expectation really is to just dive back into this thing and really get a new vehicle out there in order for us to procure that partnership with a private partner.
Okay, so that brings us to Senator Mackay. Where does it stand from a legislative point of view right now?
Well, the legislature provided the process, it provided the money a year ago, and we're really eager to see the project move forward. I appreciate Director Salaverria's due diligence, but that due diligence was done with the current RFP. And at a certain point, due diligence means just delay, looking at it over and over again. We're never going to put out a perfect RFP with no margin of risk for anyone. There's going to be risk in anything for the state, the private developer, but at a certain point, we just got to pull the trigger and let's just get going, whether it's design, build, maintain, operate, finance, and all of the other acronyms you can put in there. At a certain point, we just have to go and move forward with the stadium.
Stephen went from the Aiea Neighborhood Board. What is the hope from the community in terms of what happens there? It's a big piece of land, very important to a lot of people, not just your community.
Mm-hmm. So over the years, right, the Stadium Authority has been briefing our board on a monthly basis about what they want to do. The community has responded back numerous times via town halls or workshops or any other activity that the Stadium Authority opened to the public. And based on those, they developed what was, prior to Governor Ige putting a stop to the process, was developed by the community. It was what the community wanted. We wanted a stadium that could be used in a mixed-use environment, that could be used not just for UH football, but it could be used for concerts, it could be used for truck rallies, whatever it might be, along with housing to be incorporated on the rest of the property, and an entertainment district to support that. You know, I've heard stories of UH opening up a sports medicine complex to be associated with it. I've heard other things, but that was what was envisioned by the community at the time.
Governor Cayetano, your own vision and your perspective on this process. I mean, Senator Wakai is saying, let's get going. Do you see risks in moving quickly, or do you think that this is something that's okay to wait it out a little bit and make some decisions?
Well, no, I think you need all the facts and, start to use a little common sense. There's a Goldman Sachs study, I think, that came out that indicated if the state went along with the P3, it would cost an additional $400 million. Those are the kind of stuff you don't ignore, okay? But myself, Governor Wahe, and Governor Abercrombie, when we looked at this, we saw an opportunity that we never had, and that is that when you tear the stadium down, it will free up 98 acres of land, state-owned land. And those 98 acres, you could build 2 Ala Moana shopping centers on it. That's how big it is. Housing is the number one issue. During the campaign, all of the politicians talked about affordable housing. The stadium there will take, I think, 25 acres of the 98 acres. Will involve underground parking or something like that. Those 25 or 28 acres are really valuable. You could probably build an entire community there with low, mid-level, and high-rise housing that could house thousands of people.
Let me move on to how we got here. And Luis Salaverria, what risk did you see? You know, we've heard Mr. Wood and Senator Wakai talk about this vision of the NASED, the new Aloha Stadium Economic District, which envisioned essentially 2 deals. One was a deal for the stadium, the other was a deal for the real estate. What concerns did you find when you folks looked at it about the risks in having private developers handle all of that?
It's actually the opposite. The risk that existed, and I think there were several different factors over the course of the Aloha Stadium development discussion that ended up changing. The first was when the money was first appropriated to the Stadium Authority, it was only 170, I think, when it first started. But then the legislature and they came up with a procurement plan based upon having $170 million of state funding. But then the legislature saw that there was a need to add more money. And when they added more money and they brought that number up to 350, it really changed the finances, the financial picture of the project. So the risk really was at 170, the state was bearing a significant amount of risk based upon the partnership that was being proposed. But when the state was essentially kicking in more equity into the partnership, there was an opportunity to shift more of that risk to the private partner, and that the private partner would take on the revenue risk and be able to build us a stadium that would meet our needs.
Let me, Senator Wakai is a longtime advocate for this sort of public-private partnership, the 3P that or P3 we always talk about. How do you see it working in terms of explaining to lay people what is the value of having a real estate development happening alongside the stadium, and how are they financially tied together?
It's kind of like if we were on the market to buy a house. Right now, there's some who believe that we should do design build with $350 million, which means here's how much we have in cash, build me a stadium. There are others of us who believe that we really need a stadium that's perhaps in the $500 to $600 million range, that has luxury boxes, club level seating, rollout stage and lighting rigs, all of those things that can really bring that place to life. So it's either, do we want to buy what we have with cash, or do we want to buy the stadium with kind of a mortgage for a 30-year lifespan? And that's where I think there's a difference of opinion on those who want to see the financing of the stadium. We're going to buy stadium cash, or we're going to kind of create a mortgage through a public-private partnership where we have an entity who builds a stadium for 30 years, take care and maintain that stadium, but they're going to get revenue sharing from us over the course of that duration of that contract.
So, Governor, go ahead. I can hear you wanting to say something.
You know, when they talk about revenue sharing, and you read the study, they seem to, there's no quantification of where the revenue is going to come from. How can you quantify a revenue stream from entities that you don't know if they're ever going to be built, whether it's a hotel, a restaurant, or anything else? That's a flaw in the plan, in my opinion. Second, I think that the legislature, the Senate, should look into why the city backed out of their private partnership plan. And I think it's because the private side...
You're talking about the rail.
The rail, yeah. The private side always wants a lot of goodies, you know, whether it's development, whether it's concessions, tax breaks, and all of that. And I think that in the end, Mayor Caldwell felt it was not a good deal for the city. That's why the state should really look at this carefully and with some circumspection.
Stephen Wood with the Neighborhood Board. How has it been as a community member involved in this process to see what's happened over the last 8 to 10 months?
I'm with Senator Wakai on this. I think the longer we delay, the more it's going to cost. Look at the rail. The longer we delayed the rail, the more it cost. I mean, Lewis was just talking about, we started out at 170 million, now we're at 350 million. I think the new number's 400 million. And we just got to move on it at this point, and work with what we currently know that we can do, right? So for example, like Senator Wakai and I were talking the other day about this, and we can write an RFP, we can write a contract that gives us off-ramps. So if we don't secure private funding for certain things, then we don't put a roof on the stadium, okay? If we don't secure funding from private entities, we don't put luxury boxes into that stadium. You know, we build to what we can afford, and then if we secure those partnerships, then we build more than what, you know, to accommodate.
Let me just quickly throw out a couple of questions, because I want to respect our viewers throwing in their questions here, because both of these questions are right along the lines of what you just said. It says, will the proposed stadium have individual seats or just bleachers? Will there be a roof? That's Howard from Kailua. Jonah from Makiki, viewer, understands not wanting to burden taxpayers, but they also don't want the stadium to become a mediocre, bare bones type of stadium. If we're going to build it, we might as well build it right, especially if we want to maximize revenue making potential. Luis Salaverria, when we talk about, there's $350 million already approved. There's another 50X that needs a legislative endorsement this year to get you to the $400 million that we're talking about. What do you get for that? What do you envision it looking like? If you just built a stadium with the money you have, what would it look like?
So all of the analysis that has been proposed so far is like $400 million is not going to get us the level of stadium that we would need in order to one, maintain our status for the University of Hawaii football team, and is not going to really get us the, you know, what we think is necessary in order to create the entertainment district, as well as the critical mass that's necessary in order to really make this project work. And I think it should be known, like, you know, this administration is definitely committed to executing on this particular project, and we want to make sure, and we want to build that contract with the right off-ramps, and we want to make sure that we define the contract, unlike how maybe P3s have been done in the past, where really what we are looking out for is in the best interest of the state in this case.
Senator Wakai, getting back to that same question, why doesn't the legislature just chuck in some more money and then build a good stadium? It just seemed to the public, I think that seems like the simple solution. Why not just do it that way?
Well, I've been at this for 13 years, and when we first got the first chunk of money, before it became 170, it became 170 because of COVID. But the year previous to that, 2019, is when we allocated $350 million. At that
the
time,
$350 million that's there now is a figure from pre-COVID, like. So yeah, so the construction costs have gone up a lot since then.
Right.
Okay.
So I had talked to my colleagues back in 2019 that $350 million at that time is all that I and the community would ask for. And I want to stay true to my commitment to my colleagues. That's why this $350 is still bandied around 4 years later. And you know, we could throw $700 million out there, whatever the figure is. But I'm not going to ask my colleagues for anything more than what they put in. That's why we're trying to be creative by looking at the private sector to shore up the difference in what we really need as a stadium, or just going to a bare bones. I mean, now we're talking about a stadium that might be 25,000 seats, right? When we started this discussion, we were looking at 35,000. So every month that we delay, we add $2 million to the cost. So as we delay, we're getting a smaller and smaller stadium.
So in answer directly to Howard, no roof, some bleachers, what does it look like?
Bench seating, you're not going to get an individual seat. They're even talking about
At all?
Well, maybe in the luxury boxes you'll get a seat, but the general public would
folding
be just,
chair, yeah.
Just be a bench. Not a very good fan experience.
Governor, hearing this concept of the private sector participating in real estate and then generating enough money to make up the difference here, how realistic do you think that expectation is?
Well, I don't have much confidence in the study, and again, I want to point out to Senator Wakai that the recent study by Goldman Sachs, I think it was, says that the P3 would cost an additional $400 million. You cannot ignore, information like that.
Let me ask the Governor, who $400 million from where? Is that from the state?
It would be from the state. So, but take a look at how they approach this thing. The University of Hawaii was not even consulted. It didn't have a seat in the negotiations. It's part of the Stadium Authority, but from what I understand, whenever they discuss the proposed stadium in particular, the UH was not there. You can't use the UH football team as a loss leader. Every time the UH football team plays, it costs them about $150 million. This is under the old stadium. So you have to take into account, if you want a football team, what happens to the UH. Now, I don't know, I'd like an explanation from Senator Wakai, or I don't know if Louis can give the explanation why the university's football team was totally ignored. You hire a consultant to do a study, you pay them millions of dollars, and they don't even come up with a proposal as to where the biggest client for the stadium would be playing while the stadium is being demolished and rebuilt.
Is it true, Senator, that was a gap in the thinking?
Keep in mind that the University of Hawaii will play 7 days out of the year in that stadium. They're an important client, but they're not the biggest client. I mean, we're having discussions with United Soccer League as well as Major League Rugby, both of whom signed letters of intent with the Stadium Authority that when and if we build a stadium, they will play there, and collectively 40 play dates. So the idea is we would have them be the anchor tenants so that for the 7 UH football games, you can have that for free. Because as Governor Cayetano alluded to, in the past they paid $100,000 to $150,000 per game to the Stadium Authority to cover expenses. You can get that away to them for free. So they're an important tenant, but they're not going to be the main economic drivers for the stadium.
How important, though, are they to the stadium?
They're very
as
important.
a Division I school?
they're very important to the entire community. We have no one else to really cheer for in the state. And that's why what the situation with trying to kind of put together a makeshift stadium on campus is kind of a sorry state of affairs for them. We should have really done better for them.
And it goes back to what the governor was saying, right, earlier before this, which is we're asking to rebuild that stadium down at UH, right, to accommodate this. You're asking one of the largest growing populations in over at West Oahu to drive all the way down through traffic to attend those games down at UH. Whereas I think that if we wanted to actually do it right, we maintain the centralized location of where the stadium is at currently. It services the whole entire island, not just one part of the island.
Okay, I know Governor wants to jump in.
Okay. Well, Ching Field was kind of built by the university as an emergency measure. There was no provision for a field that UH could play on. So that's why, and give Dave Madeline and the University of Hawaii credit for coming up with the money from their own budget to build the 19,000 seat. I mean the 9,000 seats on Ching Field, and they're gonna increase it to 16,000.
You know, this is I've gotten a couple questions now on the location. So let's spend some time talking about where to put this stadium. Now, Louis Salaveria, is it the conclusion of the administration that that's where it's going to go, or is there any discussion about absolutely chucking the lava plan and having it go up somewhere else?
No, we're committed to building it at the current site.
Because
that's the process that has been started. That's the discussion that we've been having now for years. And you know, I think in order to take a look at trying to do this to do a stadium somewhere else, whether even if it's at the university or some other place, it would essentially restart the process all over again, and then you're looking at another 5 to 10 year delay.
Stephen Wood, why would the community want a stadium there? It seems like such a pain to have a stadium there.
Well, look what's there now. Okay, there's a huge giant parking lot that gets used for swap meets and occasional concerts and a fair, right? Other than that, it's an open parking lot that it just sits there. And so I think the community, and what the community has told me was that they would prefer to have that revitalized, and the stadium authority at the time took it, because this initial plan that they have right now for the stadium wasn't their first plan. Their initial plan was to basically create the same size stadium and put it in the same location. But based on community input about noise, traffic, these kind of things that the community was worried about, they offset it closer to the H201. They tilted it in a direction that would reduce the amount of noise that would impact the neighborhood. So the neighborhoods see it as a net benefit without any negatives, honestly.
So let me understand. So the way, even if you look at the current site, the stadium wouldn't be built where the stadium is now?
No, it's going to be recessed back towards the H201.
But I mean, don't we already have a hole in the ground that's appropriate for a stadium?
So if you look at the stadium plan, you'll see that the hole in the ground is actually going to be repurposed as an open air amphitheater, sort of like what you would see down at the Shell or something like that. So that we're open, facing away from the neighborhood, okay? So that way the noise is reduced, in conjunction. But going back to the point about building it somewhere else, the infrastructure is already there. The rail has a station there. The freeways all converge there. And so there is an infrastructure in place. When it comes to the housing piece, though, which is being discussed, anywhere from 5 to 10,000 units, the city has told us that it's going to take about 20 years to put in the sewer and the necessary infrastructure to support that kind of capability. So I can't imagine if we totally tear out the entire stadium and put completely housing in there, how long that would take. Because right now, just looking at half of that, it's going to take about 20 years to do.
Governor, just let me phrase the question to keep us on this particular point. Your folks' original article that you published, as I recall, suggested that UH have the stadium in Manoa. But in our other conversations, you were talking about West Oahu, the college out there. where do you think at this point, all the things you've talked about since, where do you think it should go, if not Halawa?
Okay, let me get to the Crawford site study. Okay, the Crawford site study based its conclusion on basically the same population patterns that were used back in 1967 or whenever the stadium was built. If you do that, you end up at the same place. They did not take into account the population trends in West Oahu. You see, West Oahu campus is also at the end of a rail station. And there's a lot of land that could continue the swap meet, which was a major income for the old stadium. So, but as it happened, UH took the ball and they developed Ching Stadium. Well, okay, if you can put 20,000 seats there, fine, that's okay.
Okay. Anybody else want to pitch in on that subject?
So go ahead, Senator.
I just think the idea of somehow abandoning Halawa and looking at other places is such an unfruitful discussion because it only sets us back. I mean, to Dr. Salaveria's commentary about all the money and time that's been put into figuring out how Halawa should be the entertainment district. We have buy-in from Aiea, we have buy-in from Salt Lake to say that somehow we're going to move it to Manoa and have somehow the community embrace it there, or West Oahu. All of that due diligence and massaging of the community is behind us. So I think going back to somehow we're going to go back to the drawing board, and as we talked about earlier, all of the costs sunk, and if we go down and start from zero again, it's such a waste of time. We really should be discussing how do we make the current site better. That's a fruitful discussion, not how do we look at some other place as a venue for this stadium.
And understand that's just not UH using this, right? So if we build it at West Oahu, you're asking folks from Hawaii Kai to go attend a Bruno Mars concert all the way in Ewa or in Kapolei. And so I think it's equitable to the entire island that it's centrally located so all people from all parts of the island can access it.
Okay, Governor, last word on location.
Well, I was going to say that, but I won't repeat what I said. But I want to respond to Senator Okai's comments about soccer teams coming here. They may have signed some kind of letter of intent, but if you guys should look at the history of pro teams here, they don't come here, you know why? Because of the cost of living, because of the cost of travel, and this is a terrible place for TV. You want to watch a UH game, you stay up 2 o'clock in the morning in New York, so they're not going to come here. When I was in the legislature, we tried to create, with the help of Wally Yunamini, a training station for the Giants here. It was built, and I don't know what happened to it.
Well, I'm going to respectfully disagree with you because as a kid, I remember watching the Pro Bowl with my father, and watching those games every year and watching the Stars play here. And the reason why the Pro Bowl is not here anymore is because we don't have a facility.
Well, the Pro Bowl is not anymore.
No. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. That's why they're not here anymore.
Please don't exaggerate. The Pro Bowl is not here because Roger Goodell decided to end it and go international. They're playing in Spain, in Germany, and places like that.
We're going way off track.
No, but that's why the Pro Bowl is not here anymore.
No, I understand. So, but look, I've got a bunch of. Look at this desk. So, a lot of the questions now are about timelines, procurement. Like, why does this take so long? Why did we there build Matt Kakako? It's baffling and inexcusable that talks and planning for the stadium began before San Diego State's planning for their, yet they're almost entering year two, and we have not even gotten the RFPs out. Another one says, the question is not what's up with Aloha Stadium. The question is why do we have such third world procurement practices? Although it's probably first world, that's the problem. Hawaii is a state with a tremendous swath of federal procurement organizations. So realistically, why is this so complicated? You know, why can't we make a decision and move forward? It's because I know that at the end of last year, when Governor Green was elected, he was saying, "This is one of my first priorities. I'm going to get to this right away." Yeah. You know, so what happened?
So again, it's the issue, and this is prior to this administration coming on board. Obviously, there was a disagreement between the legislature and the previous administration with regards to the direction going forward. And then because things change so much, and the study that Governor keeps on alluding to, you know, the extra $400 million price tag was over the life of the 30-year agreement and contract for this. So if you look at everything that the state would pay off, and that's the one thing that the state doesn't do very well. When we build something and we don't really look at the cost over the entire lifetime of this particular asset, and that's what we did. And when we found that, we felt that, okay, it was necessary for us to take a look at it. It was a very different procurement mechanism. It was what they called a design, build, finance, maintain, where essentially the state was assuming all of the risk to operate and to generate revenue, versus where the proposal is to go forward is a design, build, operate, and maintain, where we're really putting the onus on the private partner to generate revenue for that facility.
So I just need to help focus on these questions coming in now. A couple questions from Thomas on Facebook and email he followed up was can you say how much more money is going to be coming from the private side to give us a vision of what that stadium will really look like? I mean, is there a dollar figure about what is realistic to expect out of the private side of the development, the real estate side?
So if you look at the order of magnitude, if the order of magnitude that we did, so the state is willing to put in at this point in time, 350 plus 50, so $400 million of funding, as well as the land, as you know, the asset. There's a value to that. But then over the course,
what does that mean? Sorry.
There's a value to a partnership. If you're coming into a partnership, what are you bringing to the partnership? You're bringing cash and you're bringing the location. That's the state's contribution to this partnership. What we're asking a private partner to do is to basically generate revenue, maintain and operate, so the state is no longer on the hook to either maintain this facility, to operate this facility. It really will be an arrangement where the operation and the risk, because one of the things is like even attracting, say for example, an event, right? When government tries to attract an event, or the way it was before, essentially we were a passive participant in the process. We would find somebody, some promoter would come and say, "Hey, by the way, I'm going to bring this person and would like to rent out the Aloha Stadium for this." But if you had a private partner, that private partner could go out there and do the things that are necessary in order to drive the kind of events and the kind of revenue generation capacity.
Let me ask the Senator. What's your expectation that the private developer piece will bring into this stadium? We were talking about bleachers, no roof, bare bones. What's the realistic expectation for how much more stadium we get if we involve a private partner who also has some real estate rights?
I think we're going to get something that we can all be proud of. $350 million is going to buy us a very basic stadium. And I think where the private sector involvement is important is, in addition to the investment that they're going to put in there, is the quality of their construction, right? If they're going to be on the hook for 30 years, they're not going to build this thing with cardboard. They're going to actually use good materials.
Steel.
Steel? Maybe not steel. Maybe concrete. I mean, look at the Roman Colosseum, for thousands of years old, and it's still standing today. Maybe we should take a lesson from the Romans there. And thirdly, private sector expectations and timelines, right? The government, when we build stuff, as we see with rail, is notorious for taking forever. But if it's the private sector that's driving this thing, we are pretty much assured that on this day is when this item or the stadium will be delivered. And to Lewis's point, or Director Salaveri's point, is the stadium itself could be seen as kind of a lost leader. The money maker is the real estate that's going to go around the stadium. And that is where I think it's getting lost, that somehow we think this standalone stadium and the $400 million or costs that are going to go into the stadium somehow are going to be borne by taxpayers. But if we look at it from a private sector mentality, this housing, shopping centers, theaters, that's the revenue generation that can help pay for the construction of the stadium.
Let me just throw this out, okay? So a couple of people came in, Lena Ala by email, Aaron by email, both saying, what do you mean 20 years to get the sewer? I think it's more like 7 or 8 is what I recall. But still, you know, the timeline for developing real estate and the money coming in from real estate is far longer than building a stadium. So how do you get the money from the front, out of the front end of that proposal that builds, that adds dollars into the stadium? I mean, you, Lewis or Senator, I mean, how do you get the money at the front end out of these developers who are going to be working on a 30-year timeline to get revenue out of the property?
Hey, Daryl. It's 3 to 1, you know, so some time.
Governor, you're more than holding your own. So,
but okay, well, let me try to get an answer to that question. I mean, the timeline for the real estate development is like 30 years, right?
right.
The timeline for the stadium is like 3 years. So how does the money match, Lewis?
So really, I mean, you have to look over, you know, the entire revenue generating capability of that asset, right? You know, yes, we can look at it. Okay, well, you know, it costs this much now, and there's revenue. I mean, you know, $1 now is $1. $1, you know, 10 years from now is only worth 50 cents now. So a private partner, when they do the valuation on what the entire amount of revenue generating capacity should take into account the entire amount of revenue generating capacity that asset can generate. And that's what we want to do. We want to unlock the future potential of revenue in order to build us the stadium that we can build this year.
So does that mean that the developer will have to take out a loan to build the stadium and then pay that out of their revenue?
It's not a loan. It's an investment. That's it for a developer. A developer is investing on the risk that they are going to be able to generate revenue off of this asset.
Okay, Governor, I invite you to jump in at this point for a while. You've seen public-private partnership proposals come and go, and you've seen them fail. And
I only know of one real, and it failed. It failed in the sense.
The other one I think of is Aloha Tower, right? Where Aloha Tower, they built a big shopping center, retail thing around it, and now it's a college campus.
Yeah. I'm 83 years old. I don't remember that.
I think you were there.
But what does the private sector want to make it profitable? Because these guys are in it to make money. So when you build a hotel, how do you know if a hotel is going to make money? And do we need another hotel when we have 10, 11 million tourists coming in again? How do you quantify the revenue stream? Huh, Louis?
Oh, it is in many ways, it's a lot of science, and there's
unlock the science for us.
So right, I mean, in many ways, it's an investment, it's a risk, right? So when you look at the generating capability of a particular asset and you discount that for how long you're going to have it, that it's something that's done, you know, basically it would be the same. It's like, oh, I'm going to pay $5 million to buy this business right now that only makes, you know, $500,000 a year. Well, why are you going to do it? Because you're going to pay $5 million for it because I'm going to own it for 20 years and it's going to make me that much money over the year. And you discount.
So is the answer to my earlier question that this developer is going to be expected to cut you a check at the front end for a couple $100 million in order to build you the stadium that you're looking for? Is that what we're expecting?
That's what they're doing. That's the check that they're going to cut is the stadium that they're going to build for us.
Now, where's the revenue coming from?
Well, so you're going to have revenue, regular revenue from the stadium. We know that. Revenue generating capacity beyond what we currently do, Governor. Like, because again, we're putting off the management and the operating to an organization that can definitely maximize revenue, and the development rights around there, whether it's retail, commercial, office, all of these different revenue generating capacities, and the state will essentially be the landowner. We should be able to collect some form of revenue. We're not expecting to collect a lot. We would like to push that off to the private developer, but the stadium authority can still make some money off of it too, as well as the landowner.
Okay. Wouldn't it just be the state though, right? Because you would have general excise taxes associated with like people in the condos there.
You have economic
businesses doing
activity,
sales tax, so on and so forth.
property
The
taxes.
real property tax goes to the counties.
Yeah.
If these guys want it to go to the state, they need to amend the Constitution. Because it's in the Constitution.
Okay. Governor, can I ask you, I mean, let's say that it is unrealistic to move the location.
Yeah.
How do you think they should build it? Do you agree with the sort of House position, which is just pay the money out of the taxpayers, or do you think a public-private partnership might work at that place, even under the best circumstances?
I have more doubts because, as I said, I think the study is flawed. I mean, the fact that they left the UH out, is a sign. I don't know how they're going to make money on this thing, unless the housing that they build is housing that will bring in profits. Now, the housing that our people need is affordable housing.
So let me, that's a good segue to a couple more questions we've gotten about housing specifically. One is, Barbara from Kailua, how can you talk about spending $400 million on an entertainment district when we have a housing problem? She says play sports and take care of people who need a roof over their heads. But another question came in about, what's the realistic expectation of how much housing can be built? Where are we now in terms of the plan of how much of it would be housing for people to meet this need that we have?
I agree with Governor Cayetano that housing is a pressing societal need. But when you look at this 98 acres, is housing the best yield and return on investment for the public? The problem in Hawaii is we're land rich and we're cash poor. This is a golden opportunity for us to monetize these 98 acres. There was thought of 20,000, just forget the stadium, 20,000 units of affordable housing there. That's a $6 billion money pit that's gone. It's not going to create revenues.
Oh, wait a minute.
Let me finish, please.
Okay.
This has opportunities for revenue generation. Keep in mind, the number 2 visitor attraction in the state of Hawaii is right across the street. 1.8 million people go to the Arizona Memorial. It's not we're going to build it and we're going to hope the customer is going to come. The customer is right across the street. We should be thinking about how to lure them, plus all of us as locals and others who want to go and spend money in this entertainment, live, work, play destination. Having housing there will not lure one person from the Arizona Memorial to come and like, wow, look at this great government housing project. That's just not a good utilization of those lands.
Briefly, Governor, then I want to get Stephen involved.
Well, people want to go to Waikiki. And from Waikiki, then they can visit the Pearl Harbor or wherever. I doubt if a hotel here would attract people who are there just to visit Pearl Harbor.
So Stephen, I know that you folks who are in the community and involved with this planning process have seen a lot more concepts there. Like, what do you see being the attractive part of this plan? And do you think the neighborhood would accept if there was more housing built into the plan than there is now?
So the neighborhood does not accept the fact that they would want to put 100,000 housing units in that location, right?
Well, I think that right now it's 4,000 to 5,000.
But there has been that proposal's been put forth. Okay, so that's been out there. What we're looking at and what's been briefed to us is around 5 to 10 as a sustainable type of support from the community. Community's biggest, actually, one of the largest issues that they've had with this is the hotels themselves. The hotels, because of the transient community that comes in when you have a hotel, the community was really concerned about losing some of its identity based on that. But But like I said, over the years, we have been working with the Stadium Authority. They've addressed some of those issues. If you look at the current plan now for the stadium, they're going to convert that parking lot. It's just an asphalt parking lot. And they're going to make it a walkable, livable, green area that has shops on the first, second floors with housing above it. So people will be able to go literally from third or fourth floor, wherever they're living in their condos, down and go to a supermarket or go to a store and go right back without ever having to get in a car.
Give me an idea of another place in Hawaii that looks like that to you. Like if we were going to...
I would probably say Kaka'aka would probably be maybe the closest thing.
Okay, Luis Salaveria, Louis, sorry. What's your take on how long this is going to take? Like if we get an RFP out...
For the stadium or for the entire district?
Well, give us a timeline going out. Yeah.
If we were to execute on the plan and moving forward, put all hands on deck on this particular effort, the intention would be for a stadium to be ready by the time for the 2028 football season.
I thought it was 2027.
Well, right where it stands right now, I think it's more realistic to think about the 2028.
The timeline is once the RFP goes out, however it looks, 4 years after that is when we can expect the stadium. So, yeah, 2027 was the idea if Governor Green, come January of this year, had said, okay, let's go and push this RFP out. Then the 4-year time period would start. But now that we're kind of going back and forth, hemming and hawing, and we're not going to get an RFP out till later, perhaps later this year, then the 4-year time clock starts.
What's the impact on the UH football program under that timeline?
I think they better hope that the NCAA gives them another pass. But I think at a certain point, the NCAA is just going to get fatigued and say, well, maybe this thing is not going to happen. UH, you're done with Division I football. And that's the other tragedy if we continue to delay is we're subjecting the UH to more and more pain in trying to figure out how they keep their Division I football program alive. And if they're gone, the entire UH athletics program is gone.
That's ridiculous because the longer it takes to build a stadium, the more risk that the NCAA will sanction the UH.
Well, I'm misunderstanding you because I thought that's what he just said, right?
So
we got to get moving on it to save the UH football program.
But what I'm saying is that it's going to take a long time to build a stadium in the way that they want to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're suggesting that if they just went and focused back on Manoa, they could get a stadium that will beat the NCAA?
And I think that's what's going to happen because if I was advising if I was on the board of regents, I'd tell those guys to tell the football team, you're not going to play in Aloha Stadium unless they give you a good deal. And the UH has been suffering all these years. They don't get a cut of the parking, the concessions, and they pay rent.
So it all circles around back to the RFP, though. If we can move on the RFP, then we don't have to worry about that.
So, and that's the thing.
I just want to.
Governor, hold on just a second. I have to make sure we stay.
On the issue of the university and the university team, right? And so it's a temporary fix. Ching Field right now is a temporary fix. You do not have a D1 team with a 9,000 seat stadium.
Of course.
But at least, and UH is probably the best people to answer this question, but what we have been told is that as long as there's a commitment by the state to build a facility, that will be, at a minimum of 25,000, that they would still be able to maintain their D1 status.
UH is going to increase Ching Field by 6,000. They will meet the Division I requirement of 15,000. But I want to respond to Senator Wakai's depiction of building housing not generating revenue. When you build a house, you need a carpenter, a plumber, you need electricians, you need a lot of people, and you create jobs. That's what building housing does. And no one is saying that you're going to build a slum there. I mean, I get the impression that you guys feel that it's going to be public housing, the type that you see in Kalihi, for example, where I grew up. Nobody's thinking about that. The thing about the 98 acres and what made it so appealing to Waihe, Abercrombie, and I is that it's owned by the state. And when the state owns the land, it can really depreciate or discount the cost of building anything on the land because the state doesn't have to make a profit. Now, wait. When you know,
He's the governor.
It's 3-1.
Yeah, that's it. I agree.
3-1. But when listening to Senator Wakai about design build, Senator, the state doesn't build anything. The state has always used the private sector to build, whether it's a stadium, whether it's a school, or anything else. And the private sector, I agree with you, they can do quality work. The state doesn't build anything. That's the impression I got from you.
Yeah, but in your scenario and the way things were done in the past, it's always the taxpayers are 100% responsible for the costs. Why not embrace a new paradigm where we bring in private sector expertise and private sector money in collaboration with taxpayers' funds?
Well, I have some trepidation because, as I stated, I think the studies are flawed. I don't know how you're gonna. I don't agree with Mr. Salveri here. You can quantify all the revenue coming in. Besides, as I pointed out, the state doesn't get the real property tax.
No, I want to ask Louis Salveri. I kind of want to. We've only got about 5 minutes left. This has been a really fast hour. Yeah. What is the governor's vision now? Because before it was two developers, one developing a stadium, one developing the real estate, and then there was a relationship financially between the two entities. Mm-hmm. He wants to have only one RFP, one vendor. Is that still what he's looking at? And would the entire property be developable by that vendor, or how? What's the image now of how it would work?
I think that's a little bit of a it's not a complete picture of what an arrangement would be like, a partnership. Because yes, you could have one RFP, but you could have multiple people and multiple partners in that RFP. I mean, in many ways, at least what I've seen, and say for example, other major developments that have happened, it's usually a consortium. Everybody's going to bring their expertise. You're going to have a group that's has expertise in housing. You're going to have a group has expertise in, say for example, commercial
stadiums
and stadiums. So you're going to have that. So I think the real gem of this whole thing is that a vast majority of the people that live on the west side of Oahu commute to the urban core to go to work. If you have the ability to create 100 acres of economic activity, of transactional economy going on, you create jobs in that particular area. The only jobs that are really at that point in time right now is really, you have a big one, it's the Pearl Harbor, but then you have this stadium which really doesn't have a lot of activity outside of the events that are there. So maybe some of those other things, I'd love to bring back Castle Park.
Louis, take a ride out to a couple A and see how the city is expanding. You talk about creating jobs. They're doing it over there.
I agree,
What are
and
you
I think
talking about?
but you could create jobs along the urban core. I mean, that transit-oriented development, if we want to continue to lump people in the west side of Oahu, which has been a problem that has created a significant amount of congestion over decades of development on the west side of Oahu, is because you're lumping a whole bunch of people in a particular area.
I need to stop and go to a new question now that we've only got a couple minutes to answer. And Senator Wakai, what is the political climate now between the legislature, the state Senate, and the state House in terms of coming together on this? Because I know the governor says he wants consensus. Is he going to get a consensus out of the legislature in the next 2 weeks of this legislature?
I'm hopeful. I think what you're seeing is that the administration and the Senate both embrace the idea of a public-private partnership. The House still likes the design-build views, but I'm told that Representative Yamashita is slowly warming up to the idea of a PPP. And I just wanted to touch on.
Okay, I think I'm actually out of time, I believe. No? How much time do I have? 1 whole minute. Okay, I'm just double checking. Finish your thought, and then I'm going to give the governor one more chance.
Governor Cayetano talked about housing creating jobs. They're construction jobs for a short period of time. After that, the job is what, a security guard, a landscaper for.
I think that Lewis made that point. Your last word, Governor. 30 seconds.
Somebody made the point about the housing is to create this housing is going to take 20, 30 years. That's when the jobs are going to go. As you build more houses, you create jobs. It's an ongoing process. What are you talking about?
What's a long-term job in managing a affordable housing unit? Security guard and landscaper. That's not.
You have an opportunity for people to live right above where they're going to work. They don't even have to drive a car. They could actually go downstairs and actually work at those facilities.
Okay, so I want to actually kind of just get the last little word from Louis Salaveria. We just heard 2028. How soon is this vision going to be ready? Quick answer.
The intention is to really get an RFP out on the street by the end of this year.
The end of this year. Okay, we're slipping along. Okay, I want to thank all our viewers for joining us tonight, and we thank our guests, Senator Glenn Wakai and Stephen Wood, Louis Salaveria, and former Governor Ben Cayetano. Next week, Insights will be taking a break. Instead, please join us for Kako, Hawaii's town hall. In the wake of a crash that killed the life of a McKinley High School student, we're asking, how do we keep habitual offenders off our roads? Please join us then. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.